A black waitress followed strange noises into the cafe basement. What she found chained in the dark was a Korean mafia boss, and freeing him would change her life forever. The screaming started at 5:47 a.m., just as Zoe Mitchell was cutting through the alley behind Morrison Street. She knew this shortcut like the back of her hand, had been taking it for 3 years, ever since she started the opening shift at Rosie's Diner. The abandoned textile warehouse loomed on her right, all broken windows and rusted fire escapes. A skeleton of LA's industrial past that everyone had learned to ignore. But you couldn't ignore screaming. Even muffled, even distant, the sound cut through the early morning silence like a blade. Zoe stopped mid-step, her worn sneakers squeaking against wet pavement. She pulled out one earbud, Drake's voice dying as she strained to hear. Nothing. Just the distant rumble of traffic on the 10 freeway. Maybe she'd imagined it. Maybe her mind was playing tricks after a double shift yesterday and only 4 hours of sleep. She started walking again, faster now. She couldn't afford to be late. Rosie had already written her up twice this month, once for talking back to a handsy customer, once for giving free coffee to a homeless regular. One more strike and she'd be job hunting again, and rent was due in 5 days. The thought made her stomach clench. 1 hour, $847 in her bank account. Rent was $1,400. That left $447 for food, gas, her phone bill, and the student loan payment she'd already deferred twice. The scream came again. Closer this time, or maybe just clearer. A man's voice, raw with agony, cutting off abruptly like someone had stuffed something in his mouth. Every instinct Zoe had developed growing up in South Central told her to keep walking. Don't get involved. Don't be a witness. Don't make yourself a target. She'd learned that lesson at 12 when she'd seen a shooting and spent the next month terrified that the shooters would come for her too. But her feet stopped moving. Her hand was already pulling out her phone, thumb hovering over 911. And then she heard something else, a different voice, speaking rapid Korean, angry, demanding, followed by the wet, meaty sound of fist hitting flesh. Another scream, weaker this time, broken. "Lord help me," Zoe whispered to the empty alley, squeezing her eyes shut. "This is not my problem. This is absolutely not my problem." She looked at her phone. 5:51 a.m. If she called the cops, they'd want a statement. She'd be late for work, might lose her job. And for what? Some guy getting jumped in an abandoned building? Probably gang-related. Probably drugs. Definitely not her problem. She should walk away. Should go to work, serve coffee and eggs, collect her tips, and forget this ever happened. That's what any smart person would do. But Zoe had never been as smart as she was stubborn. Her mama used to say she'd inherited her daddy's hero complex along with his cheekbones. The man had died pulling someone from a burning car when Zoe was 6. She barely remembered him, but she remembered that. Her father had been the kind of person who ran toward danger instead of away from it. "This is insane," she muttered, pocketing her phone. Absolutely insane. But she was already moving toward the warehouse's side entrance, the one with the chain-link fence that had been cut open years ago. The gap was just wide enough for her to squeeze through, and she found herself in a concrete courtyard littered with broken glass and dead weeds pushing through cracks in the pavement. The building was massive up close, 4 stories of industrial decay. Most of the windows on the ground floor had been boarded up, but some of the boards had rotted or been torn away, leaving dark gaps like missing teeth. Zoe approached the nearest opening, heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. She pulled out her phone again, turned on the flashlight, and peered inside. Empty. Just a vast space filled with debris, collapsed ceiling tiles, ancient machinery parts, graffiti covering every surface. The screaming had stopped. Maybe they'd left. Maybe whoever was being hurt was already dead. The thought made Zoe's stomach turn, but she forced herself to climb through the window anyway, landing with a soft thud on concrete that crunched with broken glass. The smell hit her immediately. Rust and mildew and something organic and rotten that made her want to gag. She breathed through her mouth, moving deeper into the building. The phone's flashlight cut a thin beam through the darkness, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Every shadow looked like a person. Every sound, her footsteps, the settling of the old building, distant traffic, seemed amplified in the silence. And then she heard it again. Not screaming this time, but voices. Multiple men speaking Korean. The tone casual now, almost conversational. Coming from below? Zoe swept her light across the floor until she found what she was looking for. A doorway half hidden behind a collapsed section of wall. Metal stairs leading down into darkness. Every cell in her body screamed at her to turn around, to climb back out that window, go to work, pretend this never happened. But she thought about her daddy, about the kind of person he'd been, about the kind of person she wanted to be. And she thought about whoever was down there, hurt and helpless, screaming for help that might never come. Zoe descended the stairs slowly, each step careful and deliberate. The metal groaned under her weight, and she froze, certain they'd heard her. But the voices continued, unbothered. As she got closer, she could make out individual words. Not that she understood Korean, but she could hear the rhythm, the cadence. 3 distinct voices, maybe 4. And underneath it all, a different sound. Breathing, labored, wet, painful. The basement opened up before her, a wide space with concrete pillars and a low ceiling. Old industrial pipes ran overhead. The air was damp, cold, thick with that rotting smell. Zoe killed her phone light and pressed herself against the wall, letting her eyes adjust to the dim illumination coming from somewhere deeper in the space. She crept forward, moving from pillar to pillar until she could see them. 4 men, Korean, dressed in dark suits despite the early hour. 3 of them stood in a loose semicircle, smoking cigarettes and talking in low voices. The 4th, younger and nervous-looking, kept watch near what looked like a heavy metal door set into the far wall. All of them were armed. Zoe could see the guns clearly, holstered at their sides like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Oh God," Zoe breathed, so quietly it was barely sound at all. This wasn't some random mugging. This was organized, professional. The kind of thing that got witnesses killed. She should leave, right now, before they noticed her, before she became a problem they needed to solve. But then she heard it, that wet, labored breathing coming from behind the metal door. Someone was in there. Someone hurt. Someone these men had deliberately imprisoned and tortured. And they were just standing around smoking like it was nothing. Like whoever was behind that door was already dead, or might as well be. The men started moving. 2 of them stubbed out their cigarettes and headed for the stairs. The same stairs Zoe had just come down. She barely had time to duck behind a pillar, pressing herself flat against the concrete before they passed within feet of her. She could smell their cologne, hear their laughter as they joked about something in Korean. They climbed the stairs and were gone, leaving just 2 men behind, the nervous young one by the door, and an older man who'd stayed behind to finish his cigarette. Zoe's mind raced. 2 men, both armed, both probably trained. She had pepper spray in her purse. Lot of good that would do against guns. But maybe if she could create a distraction, get them both away from that door, she could get whoever was inside out before they came back. It was a terrible plan. A plan that would probably get her killed. But it was the only plan she had. She felt around the ground until her fingers found what she needed. A chunk of broken concrete about the size of her fist. Heavy, solid. She took a breath, said a quick prayer to her daddy's memory, and hurled it across the basement. It hit a metal pipe with a resounding clang that echoed through the space like a gunshot. Both men reacted immediately, hands going to their weapons. They exchanged rapid Korean, then the older one jerked his head toward the sound. The younger man nodded and moved away from the door, gun drawn, flashlight sweeping the darkness. The older one stayed put, but he turned his back to watch his partner investigate. Zoe didn't think, didn't let herself hesitate. She ran low and fast, covering the distance to the metal door in seconds. Her hands found the heavy bolt, not locked, thank God, just latched, and she threw it open. The door swung inward on rusted hinges that screamed in protest, and Zoe dove inside, slamming it shut behind her. Immediate shouting, footsteps pounding toward her. Zoe threw the bolt home just as someone slammed into the door from outside, the impact rattling her teeth. She stumbled back into darkness, phone falling from her hand, the flashlight spinning across the floor to illuminate. A man, chained to the wall, barely conscious, blood everywhere, on his face, his torn shirt, pooling on the concrete beneath him. Korean, probably late 20s with features that would have been handsome if they weren't so destroyed. His left eye was swollen shut, his lips split, his breathing shallow and ragged. The chains were heavy industrial things, locked around his wrists and bolted to the wall, leaving him barely able to move. And he was staring at her with his one good eye, expression somewhere between shock and disbelief, like he couldn't quite process that someone had just burst into his prison cell. The door shook again, harder this time. Voices screaming in Korean, orders being shouted. The bolt was holding, but Zoe could see it bending under the force. They'd break through in minutes, maybe seconds. She grabbed her phone from the floor and ran to the man, dropping to her knees in front of him. "Hey," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Hey, can you hear me? We need to get you out of here." His eye focused on her slowly, like he was coming back from somewhere far away. When he spoke, his voice was a ruined rasp, barely audible over the pounding on the door. "Run. Get out. They'll kill you." "Not without you." Zoe examined the chains, looking for a weak point. The locks were professional grade, the kind you'd need bolt cutters or a key to open. The bolts in the wall were slightly better, old, rusty, set into concrete that was crumbling with age and water damage. Maybe, just maybe, if she had something to pry with. "Who are you?" the man asked, his English barely accented but shaped strange by his injuries. "Why would you come here?" "Because you were screaming," Zoe said, still searching for something, anything she could use, and nobody else was coming to help. "You're insane." But something flickered in his expression, something that might have been hope if it weren't drowning in pain and resignation. "They're going to break through that door. When they do, they'll kill us both." "Then I guess we better work fast." Zoe found what she needed, a piece of rebar, probably from some long-ago construction, lying abandoned in the corner. She grabbed it and wedged it behind one of the wall bolts, using it as a lever. "What's your name?" "Does it matter?" His breathing was getting worse, more labored. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth when he spoke. "It matters to me. I'm Zoe, and you are." A pause. The door shook again, and Zoe heard new voices. The other two men had returned. 4 against 1 now. 4 armed men against one waitress with pepper spray and a piece of rebar. The odds were laughable. "Hu Jun," he finally said. "Kim Hu Jun." "Nice to meet you, Hu Jun. Now hold still." Zoe put all her weight on the rebar, felt the bolt shift slightly. The concrete around it was cracking. A few more tries and maybe... The bolt came free with a grinding shriek of metal on concrete. One wrist liberated, even if it still had a heavy chain and shackle attached. Hu Jun gasped as blood rushed back into his arm, the pain clearly excruciating. But he was already moving, using his free hand to help Zoe with the second bolt, both of them working the rebar in desperate tandem. Outside, the shouting had stopped. That was somehow worse than the noise. It meant they'd stopped trying to break through and started planning something else. Zoe's mind supplied helpful possibilities. Shooting through the door, setting fire to the building, waiting them out. All of them ended with her and Hu Jun dead. "There!" Hu Jun breathed as the second bolt gave way. He was free of the wall, though the chains still hung from his wrists, heavy and restrictive. He tried to stand and immediately collapsed, legs giving out after what must have been hours or days chained in one position. Zoe caught him, staggering under his weight. He was taller than her, broader, and even injured, he was solid muscle. "I can't..." His voice was thick with frustration and pain. "My legs. I can't feel them properly." Then I'll be your legs. Zoe looked around desperately. The room was maybe 12 by 15 feet, concrete on all sides except for the metal door. No windows, no other exits. They were trapped. The men outside knew it. And any second now they'd... Gunshots. 3 in rapid succession, aimed at the door's bolt from outside. Metal shrieked and sparked, and the bolt began to bend. One more shot and it would break completely. Zoe threw herself over Jun instinctively, shielding him with her body as debris and ricochets filled the small space. "What are you doing?" Jun demanded, trying to push her off. "Get away from me. You can still run." "I'm not leaving you," Zoe snapped. And then, because the door was about to break and they had maybe seconds left, she did the only thing she could think of. She started screaming, "Help! Someone help us! They're trying to kill us! Help!" Jun stared at her like she'd lost her mind. "What are you... making noise! Getting attention!" Zoe screamed louder. "Fire! Fire in the building! Someone call 911!" It was a desperate gamble. This part of downtown was mostly empty at 6 a.m., all warehouses and industrial spaces that wouldn't open for hours. But there were homeless encampments nearby. Early morning joggers sometimes used the waterfront path 2 blocks over. Someone might hear. Someone might call the cops. And these men, whoever they were, probably didn't want police attention any more than she did. The shooting stopped. Zoe kept screaming, throat already raw, until Jun grabbed her arm. "Stop! Listen!" She went quiet and heard it. Sirens. Distant but getting closer. Someone had called it in. The police were coming. Outside the door, urgent Korean. Arguments. Then the sound of running feet. The men were retreating. Zoe slumped against the wall, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. "Oh my God! Oh my God, we're alive! We're actually alive!" For now, Jun was looking at the door, expression dark. "The police will ask questions. They'll want to know who I am, who those men were. And Zoe..." He turned to her, his one good eye intense despite the pain. "You don't want to be involved in those answers. Trust me." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm not a good person. Those men who were torturing me, they're criminals, but so am I. And when the police figure that out, anyone associated with me becomes a liability, a witness, a problem." The sirens were very close now, maybe a block away. Zoe's mind raced. She should stay, should tell the police everything, should be a good citizen and cooperate with the law. But something in Jun's expression told her he was right. Getting involved with whatever this was would destroy her life. "Then we run," she said. "What?" "We run. Right now. Before they get here." Zoe stood, legs wobbly but holding. "Can you walk if I help you?" "Zoe, you don't understand." "I understand that I just spent the last 10 minutes fighting to keep you alive. And I'm not about to waste that by letting you get arrested or shot or whatever happens next." She grabbed his arm, hauling him to his feet. He swayed but stayed upright, chains clinking. "Now move. We've got maybe 2 minutes." "You're insane," Jun said again. But he was moving, leaning heavily on her as they stumbled toward the door. Zoe eased it open, half expecting bullets, but the basement was empty. The men had fled completely, leaving only cigarette butts and bloodstains as evidence they'd been there. Getting up the stairs was agonizing. Jun could barely lift his feet, and the chains kept catching on the metal steps. Zoe basically dragged him, her shoulders screaming in protest, sweat pouring down her back despite the morning chill. Behind them, the sirens had stopped. The cops were here, probably at the front of the building. They emerged into the main floor just as Zoe heard voices echoing from the far side of the warehouse. "LAPD! Anyone in here?" They had seconds. Zoe half-carried Jun to the window she'd entered through, practically shoving him outside before climbing through herself. They collapsed in the courtyard, both gasping for air. "My car," Jun managed. 2 blocks, black Audi, license plate." He rattled off numbers, and Zoe committed them to memory, even as part of her brain screamed that this was insane. She was helping a self-confessed criminal escape the police. This was a felony. This was life-destroying stupidity, but she'd already come this far. Might as well see it through. Keys? They took them. Everything. But there's a spare. He grimaced, fumbling with his torn shirt. Taped to my chest. Old habit. Zoe found the key, a tiny magnetic box stuck to his ribs. You tape car keys to your body? I have trust issues. His attempt at a smile looked more like a grimace. Clearly justified, given present circumstances. They moved through the back alleys, Jun getting steadier with each step as feeling returned to his legs. The chains were a problem. Too visible. Too loud. But there was nothing they could do about it now. 2 blocks felt like 2 miles, every sound making Zoe jump, certain they'd be caught. But then they were there, and the black Audi beeped softly as Zoe unlocked it. She helped Jun into the passenger seat, then ran around to the driver's side. Her hands shook as she started the engine, pulled away from the curb, forced herself to drive normally despite the urge to floor it. They made it 3 blocks before Jun passed out, his head lolling against the window. Zoe glanced at him, at the blood still seeping through his shirt, the chain still locked around his wrists, and thought, what have I done? But she kept driving, heading away from downtown, away from the warehouse and the police and the life she'd had an hour ago. She'd crossed a line and there was no going back. All she could do was move forward and hope she'd made the right choice. Zoe's apartment was a studio in Inglewood, 3rd floor of a building that had seen better decades. She'd parked in the back alley, helped Jun up the external staircase, and gotten him inside just as her neighbor Mrs. Chen opened her door to put out trash. The old woman had given them a long, hard look, Zoe supporting a bloodied man in chains, before simply nodding and going back inside. She didn't even react, Zoe said, half laughing with hysteria as she helped Jun onto her secondhand couch. Like people in chains show up here every day. Smart woman. Jun's voice was fading, exhaustion and pain pulling him under. Knows when something's not her business? Unlike me. Zoe locked the door, threw the deadbolt, then stood there staring at the crime lord bleeding on her IKEA furniture. Her phone buzzed. Rosie's Diner, undoubtedly wondering where the hell she was. Zoe ignored it. She'd lost her job. That much was certain. The only question was what else she'd lose before this was over. First aid kit, she said, trying to think clearly. I need to check your injuries, and we need to get those chains off. Bolt cutters. Hardware store. Jun's eye was closing, the adrenaline that had kept him going finally depleting. And Zoe, when I wake up, I need to make some calls. People will be looking for me, some of them to help. Some, he didn't finish, but he didn't need to. Zoe found her first aid kit, a modest thing she'd assembled after watching too many medical dramas, and started cleaning his wounds. The closer she looked, the worse it got. Broken ribs for sure, maybe internal bleeding, definitely a concussion. He needed a hospital, but that wasn't an option. Not for a criminal on the run. Who were those men? She asked as she worked. The ones who had you. Rivals. Jun's voice was barely a whisper. The Choi organization. They've been trying to push into my territory for months. This was supposed to send a message. Torture me, get information about my operations, then kill me publicly. Your organization. Zoe paused, gauze in hand. You run a gang. I run the Kim family. We're not a gang. He opened his good eye, looking at her directly. We're much worse than that. We're the Korean Mafia, and I'm the head of operations in Los Angeles. The words should have terrified her, should have sent her running to the cops no matter the consequences. Instead, Zoe just nodded and went back to bandaging. Well, Mr. Mafia boss, you're human enough to bleed, so sit still and let me patch you up. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. You really are insane. So people keep telling me. She finished with the visible wounds and sat back, studying her handiwork. This is just temporary. You need real medical attention. I have a doctor, one who doesn't ask questions. Jun was fading fast, words slurring. But I can't call until I know it's safe. Until I know who betrayed me. Betrayed you. The Choi's knew where I'd be, knew when I'd be alone. Someone in my organization sold me out. His jaw clenched, anger burning through the exhaustion. When I find out who, they'll wish the Choi had gotten to them first. The casual violence in his tone should have scared her. Instead, Zoe found herself asking, "What happens now?" Now? Hoojun looked at her, really looked at her, seeing her maybe for the first time. Brown skin, natural hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing yesterday's jeans and a t-shirt from a 5K she'd run in college. She was 26, tired, probably about to lose her job, with a criminal bleeding on her couch, and no idea how her life had spiraled so far out of control in just 2 hours. "Now you go to work," Hoojun said. "You pretend this never happened. You forget you ever met me. And when I'm strong enough, I'll leave and never bother you again. And if your enemies find you here first, then I'll handle it. With broken ribs and chains on your wrists?" Zoe shook her head. "Great plan. Really foolproof." "Zoe," his voice took on that commanding tone, the one that probably made his subordinates jump. "This isn't your world. You saved my life, and I'm grateful. But the longer you stay involved, the more danger you're in. These aren't people who show mercy. They'll kill you just for helping me. Then I guess we'd better make sure they don't find you." Zoe stood, grabbed her keys. "I'm going to the hardware store for bolt cutters. Then I'm calling in sick to work. Might as well, since I'm probably already fired. And then we're going to figure out how to keep you alive long enough to heal. After that, you can disappear, and I can go back to my boring life." "Why?" The question stopped her at the door. "Why are you doing this? You don't know me. You owe me nothing." Zoe turned back to look at him, at this dangerous, broken man who'd been tortured and left to die in a basement, who ran a criminal empire and probably had blood on his hands, who she should hate or fear, or at the very least want nothing to do with. "Because you were screaming," she said simply, "and I couldn't walk away. That's it. That's the whole reason. Maybe it's stupid. Maybe I'll regret it. But I made my choice, and I'm seeing it through." Something flickered in Hoojun's expression, something raw and vulnerable that he quickly buried. "You're going to get yourself killed." "Probably," Zoe smiled despite everything. "But at least I'll die interesting instead of boring. Better than getting fired from a diner job." She left before he could argue, locking the door behind her. The hardware store was 10 minutes away, open early for contractors. Zoe bought bolt cutters, paying with cash and avoiding eye contact with the clerk. Then she sat in her car for a long moment, hands on the steering wheel, really processing what she'd done. She'd harbored a fugitive, helped a criminal escape police, destroyed evidence, obstructed justice. The list of felonies was growing by the hour. And for what? For a man she didn't know, who'd admitted to being a crime lord, who brought nothing but danger into her life. Her phone rang, Rosie's Diner. Zoe answered, already knowing how this would go. "Where the hell are you?" Rosie's voice was sharp, annoyed. "Your shift started an hour ago. You know how many times I've covered for you, Zoe? How many chances I've given you?" "I know, I'm sorry. I had an emergency." "Don't care, don't want to hear it. This is the third time this month. You're done. Come pick up your last check whenever." The line went dead. Zoe stared at her phone, feeling oddly numb. She'd just lost her job, lost her only source of income. In 5 days, she wouldn't be able to pay rent. She'd be evicted, homeless, destroyed. All because she'd heard screaming and couldn't walk away. All because of some stupid hero complex inherited from a father she barely remembered. All because she'd looked into a stranger's eyes and seen someone worth saving. "Worth it," she told her reflection in the rearview mirror. "Has to be worth it." When she got back to her apartment, Hoojun was awake, sitting up despite the obvious pain it caused him. He'd managed to find her kitchen and was drinking water straight from the tap, his movements careful and deliberate. "You came back," he said, something like surprise in his voice. "I said I would." Zoe set the bolt cutters on the counter. "Now hold still. This is going to hurt." It took 20 minutes to cut through the chains, the metal thick and resistant. Jun bore it in silence, only the slight tightening around his eyes betraying pain when she had to maneuver his injured wrists. When the last chain fell away, he rotated his arms slowly, assessing the damage. Thank you, he said quietly, for everything. The rescue, the medical care, the bolt cutters, and I'm sorry about your job. I heard. You heard. Thin walls and you weren't exactly quiet. He looked at her, expression serious. I'll pay you. Whatever you were making, I'll triple it. Compensation for what you've lost. I don't want your money. Zoe, be practical. You just lost your income because of me. Let me fix that. I said no. Her voice was sharp, defensive. I didn't do this for money. I'm not some charity case you need to manage. I made my choices, and I'll deal with the consequences. Jun studied her, eyes narrowed. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. A real smile that transformed his battered face into something almost boyish. You're proud. I respect that. But pride doesn't pay rent. I'll figure something out. I always do. I'm sure you will. He stood, testing his legs, which held his weight much better now. But while you're figuring it out, I need to make those calls. May I use your phone? Zoe hesitated. Letting him use her phone meant connecting her directly to whatever criminal network he ran. Meant making herself even more complicit. But she'd already crossed too many lines to pretend she was still playing it safe. She handed over her phone and moved to the window, giving him privacy while he spoke rapid Korean to whoever answered. His voice changed when he spoke his native language. Became harder, more commanding. This was the crime lord, not the injured man she'd rescued. This was the person people feared. When he finished, he handed back the phone. They're coming, my second in command and a doctor. They'll be here in 30 minutes. Here? To my apartment? Zoe's voice rose. Are you insane? What if someone followed them? They weren't followed. My people are professionals. Jun moved closer, and Zoe found herself taking an instinctive step back. He noticed, stopped, held up his hands in a gesture of peace. I know you're scared. You have every right to be. But I promise you, Zoe Mitchell, nothing will happen to you. I'll make sure of it. How do you know my last name? I never told you. A pause, then Jun reached into his pocket, slowly, clearly not wanting to startle her, and pulled out his phone. The battery was dead, but he showed her the lock screen anyway. Before they took everything, I managed to take a picture of your driver's license. From your purse, when you were checking my injuries. You went through my purse? I needed to know who'd saved me. In case... He trailed off, but Zoe understood. In case it was a trap. In case she was working for his enemies. In case he needed to know who to eliminate. So you know where I live, where I work, everything about me. Yes, and now you know what I am. Jun's expression was unreadable. We're both vulnerable to each other, both holding information that could destroy the other. It's honest in a strange way. Honest? Zoe laughed, slightly hysterical. There's nothing honest about any of this. You're a criminal. I'm an idiot who helped you. And now your people are coming here, to my home, and I'm supposed to just trust that they won't kill me to tie up loose ends? They won't. Jun moved closer again, and this time Zoe held her ground. Because I'll tell them you're under my protection, that anyone who touches you answers to me personally. In my world, that's an absolute guarantee. Your world sounds terrifying. It is. He didn't try to sugarcoat it. It's violent and dangerous and built on fear and power, but it also has rules, codes. And one of those codes is that debts must be repaid. You saved my life, Zoe. That means I owe you everything. And I always pay my debts. Before Zoe could respond, there was a knock at the door. Specific pattern, clearly a signal. Jun relaxed immediately, but Zoe's heart rate spiked. This was it. The moment where her normal life ended completely. Jun opened the door to reveal two men. The first was older, maybe 40, with silver threading through his black hair and eyes that missed nothing. He took in the scene, Jun's injuries, the blood-stained couch, Zoe standing defensive by the window, and spoke rapid Korean. The second man was younger, carrying a medical bag, already moving toward Hu Jun with professional efficiency. Zoe, Hu Jun said, switching to English. This is Dae-jung, my second in command, and Dr. Park. They're here to help. Dae-jung turned to her, and Zoe felt the full weight of his assessment. He was evaluating her, deciding if she was a threat, an asset, or a liability. You're the one who saved him, he said in perfect English. Thank you. You've done the Kim family a great service. I didn't do it for your family. I did it because he was hurt. Something flickered in Dae-jung's expression. Surprise, maybe, or respect. Even so, you have our gratitude and our protection should you need it. What I need is for all of you to leave. Zoe hated how her voice shook. I want my life back. I want to forget this ever happened. I'm afraid that's not possible, Dae-jung said, not unkindly. The moment you helped our boss, you became part of this situation. The Chois will be looking for whoever rescued him. If they find you, they won't. Hu Jun's voice cut through, commanding an absolute. Because she's going to disappear for a while. Under our protection at one of our safe houses until this is resolved. Excuse me? Zoe stared at him. I'm not disappearing anywhere. This is my life, my apartment, your funeral if you stay here. Hu Jun moved toward her, wincing at the movement but determined. Zoe, listen to me. My enemies are ruthless. They will find out who helped me. If they haven't already, they will come here, and they will hurt you in ways you can't imagine, just to send me a message. I won't let that happen. So what? I just abandoned my life? My home? Go into hiding because you pissed off the wrong people? Yes. No apology, no softening, just hard truth. That's exactly what you do, because the alternative is dying, painfully, while I'm forced to watch. And I've seen enough death this week. Dr. Park finished his initial examination and spoke quietly to Dae-jung in Korean. Whatever he said made the older man's expression darken. He turned to Hu Jun, switching to English for Zoe's benefit. You need surgery. That rib punctured your lung partially. You're bleeding internally. How long do I have? Hours, maybe a day if we're lucky. Dr. Park's voice was clinical but concerned. We need to get you to the facility immediately. After we secure her. Hu Jun nodded toward Zoe. She goes to the Wilshire safe house first. Full security detail. Then you can cut me open. Boss, with respect, you could die. And she will die if we leave her unprotected. My priority is clear. Hu Jun's tone left no room for argument. He looked at Zoe, eyes intense despite the pain he must have been in. Pack a bag. Enough for a week. We leave in 5 minutes. I'm not going. Yes, you are. You can't make me. Actually, I can. Dae-jung could carry you out of here right now. But I'd rather you came willingly. I'd rather you understood that this is for your safety. Zoe wanted to fight, wanted to scream that he had no right, that she'd saved his life, and this was how he repaid her, by kidnapping her. But she looked at Dae-jung's expression, at the doctor's concern, at Hu Jun swaying slightly on his feet despite his attempt to appear strong. And she understood. This wasn't a request. This was a mafia boss protecting an asset. She'd saved him, which made her valuable. And in his world, valuable things were kept safe, whether they wanted to be or not. 1 week, she said finally. I'll give you 1 week to figure this out. Then I want my life back. All of it. And you leave me alone forever. Agreed. Hu Jun extended his hand, and Zoe shook it, feeling the roughness of his palm, the strength even in his injured state. 1 week. You have my word. She packed quickly. Clothes, toiletries, her laptop, phone charger, the essentials of a life being temporarily abandoned. When she emerged from the bathroom, Dr. Park was already working on Hu Jun, starting an IV, preparing him for transport. The man looked worse by the minute, color draining from his face. He might not make it, might he? Zoe asked Dae-jung quietly. The surgery, it's serious. Very serious. Dae-jung's expression was grim. But he's survived worse. He's too stubborn to die. Especially now. What does that mean? Dae-jung looked at her, something knowing in his eyes. It means he has something to live for, someone to protect. That changes things. Before Zoe could process that, they were moving down the back stairs into a black SUV with tinted windows. Hu Jun was loaded into a second vehicle, the doctor with him. And then they were driving, leaving her neighborhood, her life, everything familiar behind. The safe house was in Wilshire, an upscale building with doormen and security cameras. The apartment itself was beautiful. Hardwood floors, modern furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Nothing like Zoe's modest studio. Make yourself comfortable, Daejung said, showing her around. There's food in the kitchen, fully stocked. Internet, television, books. You'll have a security detail outside at all times. 2 men, rotating shifts. Don't leave without them. So I'm a prisoner. You're a guest, an honored one. But yes, for your own safety, you need to stay here until we resolve the situation with the Choi's. And how long will that take? Depends. Could be days, could be weeks. Daejung paused at the door. Miss Mitchell, I understand this is difficult, but the boss was right. You saved him, which makes you a target. We'll keep you safe. And when this is over, you can return to your life. You have my word. Then he was gone, and Zoe was alone in a luxury prison, surrounded by expensive things that meant nothing. She moved to the windows, looked out at the city below, and wondered what the hell she'd gotten herself into. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Zoe, Hu Jun's voice, weaker than before but determined. I'm about to go into surgery. I needed to call you first. Why? Because if something goes wrong, if I don't make it, I need you to know something. A pause filled with the sound of medical equipment beeping. You gave me hope. For the first time in years, someone helped me without wanting something in return, without being paid or threatened or manipulated. You just helped because it was right. Hu Jun, let me finish. His voice was fading, drugs or exhaustion pulling him under. In my world, that doesn't exist. Everyone has an angle. Everyone wants power or money or leverage. But you risked everything for a stranger. You're either incredibly stupid or incredibly brave. And I think it's the second one. Zoe's throat tightened. Don't talk like you're dying. You're going to be fine. Maybe, maybe not. But either way, I need you to know. When I heal, when this is over, I'm going to repay this debt. I'm going to give you back your life. Better than before, safer than before. You saved me, Zoe Mitchell. And I don't forget that, ever. Just survive the surgery, you stubborn man. We can talk about debts later. A soft laugh, barely audible. Stubborn? Yeah, I've been called that. Okay, I'll survive. For you, I'll survive. The line went dead. Zoe stood there, phone pressed to her ear, trying to understand the emotions churning through her. Fear for this man she barely knew. Anger at the situation he dragged her into. And something else. Something dangerous and complicated and absolutely insane. Care. She cared about him, about this criminal, this dangerous man who'd brought nothing but chaos into her life. She cared if he lived or died, and that terrified her more than anything else. The hours crawled by. Zoe tried to watch TV, couldn't focus. Tried to read, couldn't process the words. Finally, she just paced, wearing a path in the expensive hardwood, checking her phone every 30 seconds for news. Night fell. The city lights came on, turning Los Angeles into a glittering sprawl. And still, no word. Zoe's imagination supplied terrible possibilities. Hu Jun dying on the operating table, his enemies finding the facility, everything going wrong in spectacular fashion. At 11:47 p.m., her phone finally rang. Daejung. He made it, the man said without preamble. Surgery went well. Dr. Park repaired the lung, stabilized the bleeding. He'll need weeks to recover fully, but he'll live. Relief flooded through Zoe so intensely her knees went weak. She sat down hard on the expensive couch, phone pressed to her ear. Thank God. Where is he? Can I see him? He's at our medical facility. And no, Not yet. He's still unconscious and we need to keep his location secure, but he asked me, before the surgery, to tell you something if he survived. What? A pause, then Dae-jung's voice, slightly amused. He said to tell you he's too stubborn to die, and that you're stuck with him now. Zoe laughed, slightly hysterical. That sounds like him. Miss Mitchell, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Dae-jung's tone turned serious. What are your intentions toward my boss? My intentions? I don't have any intentions. I helped him because he needed help. And now? Now I want to go home, back to my normal life. You're lying. Not accusatory, just factual. I heard your voice when I told you he survived. That wasn't relief for a stranger. That was relief for someone you care about. Zoe wanted to deny it, wanted to insist she felt nothing, that this was all just obligation and circumstances. But she was tired of lying. I don't know what I feel. I barely know him. But yes, I cared if he lived or died. Is that a crime? In our world? Potentially. Dae-jung sighed. Miss Mitchell, my boss is a good man in a bad business. He's tried to be honorable, to minimize harm, to protect people under his care. But he's also lonely, isolated. The kind of power he has makes real connections impossible. Everyone either fears him or wants something from him. Why are you telling me this? Because I saw how he looked at you in your apartment before we left. I've known him for 10 years and I've never seen that expression on his face. Interest, yes. Attraction, occasionally. But this was different. This was... He trailed off, searching for the word. This was what? Zoe asked, even though part of her didn't want to know. Hope, Dae-jung said finally. He looked at you with hope, like you were something good in a world that's shown him very little goodness. And that makes you incredibly dangerous. Dangerous how? Because if he cares about you, truly cares, his enemies will use that against him, against both of you. The Kim family has rules about personal attachments for exactly this reason. They make you vulnerable. Then it's a good thing I'm leaving in a week, Zoe said firmly. Back to my boring waitress life, far away from all of this. Do you really think it'll be that simple? Dae-jung's voice was knowing. That you can just walk away and forget? That he can? It has to be, because the alternative is... Zoe couldn't finish. Couldn't articulate the terrifying possibility that this insane connection with a criminal she'd known for less than a day, could be something real, something worth risking everything for. Get some rest, Miss Mitchell, Dae-jung said gently. Tomorrow things will look clearer, and when the boss wakes up, I'm sure he'll want to see you, to thank you properly. He hung up. Zoe sat in the dark apartment, surrounded by luxury that meant nothing, and tried to process the last 18 hours of her life. She'd lost her job, harbored a fugitive, gone into hiding, and somehow, impossibly, insanely, started caring about a man who represented everything she should avoid. Her phone buzzed with a text. Unknown number, but she knew who it was. Awake. Hurts like hell, but alive. Because of you. Thank you, Zoe, for everything. HJ. She stared at the message, thumb hovering over the keyboard. She should send something brief, professional, distant, should maintain boundaries before this got any more complicated. Instead, she typed, You scared me. Don't do that again. Rest. We'll talk when you're stronger. The response came immediately. We'll do more than talk. When I'm healed, I'm taking you to dinner. Somewhere nice, where you can yell at me properly for ruining your life. Despite everything, the fear, the uncertainty, the absolute insanity of her situation, Zoe smiled. You can barely stand and you're already planning dates? You really are stubborn. Told you. Too stubborn to die. Too stubborn to let you walk away without showing you what your bravery earned. Sleep well, Zoe Mitchell. Dream of better things than warehouses and basements. Zoe set down her phone and moved to the bedroom, exhaustion finally catching up with her. She lay down on sheets that probably cost more than her monthly rent and stared at the ceiling, processing the impossible truth. She'd saved a mafia boss. He'd promised to repay the debt, and somehow in the space of one terrifying morning, her entire life had transformed. No job, no apartment she could safely return to, and a dangerous criminal who looked at her with hope in his eyes. It was insane, impossible, the kind of thing that happened in movies, not to 26-year-old waitresses from Inglewood. But it had happened, and now Zoe had to figure out what to do with it. With him, with this connection that neither of them had asked for, but both of them felt. 1 week, she whispered to the darkness. I gave him 1 week, and then I walk away. Back to normal, back to safe. But even as she said it, Zoe knew she was lying, because nothing about her life would ever be normal or safe again. She'd crossed into Hu Jun's world, and that world had a gravity all its own, a pull that was already making it hard to imagine leaving. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep, knowing that when she woke up, everything would be different, that the man in the hospital bed across the city would recover and come to collect on that dinner promise. That Daejung was right. It wouldn't be simple, wouldn't be easy to just walk away. Because Zoe had heard Kim Hoo-jun screaming in that basement, and she'd run toward the sound instead of away from it. And that single choice, that moment of stupid bravery, had changed everything. For both of them. Tomorrow she'd start figuring out what came next. How to navigate this new reality where mafia bosses owed her debts and enemies lurked in shadows and danger was a constant companion. How to protect herself while figuring out if what she felt for Hoo-jun was real or just adrenaline and circumstance. But tonight she just let herself feel the relief that he was alive, that her choice to help him had mattered, that somewhere across the city, a dangerous man was healing because she'd been brave enough to care. And as Zoe drifted off to sleep in her luxury prison, she allowed herself one small, terrifying truth. She didn't regret it. Not the lost job, not the upended life, not the danger. Because for the first time in years, she felt truly alive, truly seen, truly connected to something bigger than her small, safe existence. Kim Hoo-jun had looked at her in that basement, chained and broken, and asked why she'd come. And she'd told him the truth, because he was screaming, and nobody else was coming to help. But there was more to it than that. Some part of her, the part that remembered her father's hero complex and her own stubborn refusal to be anything less than brave, had recognized something in Hoo-jun, something worth saving, something worth risking everything for. And now, as dawn approached and a new day began, Zoe understood that she'd done more than rescue a man from a basement. She'd set in motion something that couldn't be stopped, a connection that would test everything she thought she knew about herself, about safety, about love in the most dangerous places, the black waitress and the Korean mafia boss. Two people from completely different worlds, brought together by violence and screaming in the dark. It shouldn't work. It couldn't work. Every rational part of her brain knew that. But as Zoe finally fell asleep, exhausted and overwhelmed and terrified and exhilarated all at once, she couldn't help but think, maybe, just maybe, some things were worth the risk. Some people were worth being brave for, even if it meant walking away from safety and into something wild and uncertain and absolutely impossible. And Kim Hoo-jun, recovering in a secret medical facility, drugged but conscious enough to feel, clutched his phone and read Zoe's last message one more time. You scared me. Don't do that again. She'd been scared for him. This woman who owed him nothing, who should have run the moment she learned what he was, had been scared when he went into surgery, had cared if he lived or died. In 28 years of life, in a decade of running a criminal empire, Hoo-jun had never had someone care about him just because. Without agenda, without fear, without obligation. Just pure, simple human concern. It was addictive, terrifying, completely unprecedented. Boss? Dr. Park appeared, checking monitors. You should be resting. I am resting. Hoo-jun set down the phone, already planning. 1 week, she'd said. 1 week to resolve the situation and give her back her life. But he didn't want to give her back her old life. He wanted to give her a new one, better, safer, fuller. Wanted to show her that choosing to save him hadn't been a mistake, that sometimes the most unlikely connections were the ones that changed everything. He had 1 week to prove himself worth the risk she'd taken, 1 week to show Zoe Mitchell that walking into that warehouse had been the best decision she'd ever made, 1 week to convince her that leaving his world would be harder than staying in it. And Kim Hoo-jun, who'd built an empire through strategy and ruthlessness and careful calculation, found himself facing the most important negotiation of his life. Not for territory or power or money, but for something infinitely more valuable. The chance at something real, something good, something that made all the darkness worth it. He closed his eyes, let the drugs pull him back under, and held on to one thought. She saved me. Now I'll save her. From loneliness, from danger, from a life smaller than she deserves. I'll show her what bravery earns, what caring means in a world that's forgotten how. And as both Zoe and Hoo-jun slept in their separate locations, the city continued around them. The Choi organization regrouped and planned revenge. Dae-jung coordinated security and wondered if his boss had finally found something worth more than power. Mrs. Chen in Zoe's apartment building watered her plants and said nothing about the blood-stained man she'd seen, because some things weren't her business. The story had just begun. The rescue was complete, but the real challenge, figuring out how two impossible people from incompatible worlds could build something lasting, was only starting. Black waitress, Korean mafia boss, a basement, a scream, a choice made in the early morning darkness, and now, everything that came after. What happened next? That was the question neither of them could answer yet. But both of them, sleeping in their separate spaces, knew one thing for certain: nothing would ever be the same again.